Hi everyone, we're starting our new project, stained glass, today. Really starting it. So get ready, because here we go. And welcome back to the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Hi, and welcome back to the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Today we're getting started on our stained glass project. And as I told you before, this is a new one to me. I don't even know what kind of technique to call it, because it's a combination of a lot of different techniques and just a lot of imagination, let's be honest. So, we are going to use a piece of white fabric as the background. We've got a selection of brightly colored fabrics, very vibrant, that we're going to use. And this came from a fat quarter bundle, with the exception of a piece of black and a piece of yellow that I'm using to round it out. Other things we're going to need. We're going to need some scissors. I think we're going to need these because they're very small and very accurate. These cut very nicely, but they're small, so we can get into the small places that we need. We're going to be using some applique glue. This is strictly optional. We're going to be using the double-sided adhesive tape that's a 1/4 inch wide, and it's made for quilting, and I believe that this one washes away if you choose to wash this project. And we're going to use these loop pressing bars by Clover. Now, if you have any question about these two in particular, check in the description of last week's video that introduced this project, and you'll see all the details of that. The other thing that I'm going to use is I'm going to use a little light box. And this was given to me as a gift, but it's a very inexpensive but very functional light box. It's just, I would say, 8.5 by 14, or just a little bit bigger than that. And it does have, oh, it's not plugged in. It does have the ability to be very bright or very dim, depending on your needs. Now, let me tell you about what I've already done. I took this design, and let's put it over here just a little bit more, from a link on the internet, which is also in that original video that describes this project. And I blew it up on my home computer and taped it together. And then I decided what colors were going to be in each spot of the design. And I just used some little markings from a colored pencil set to show that. That light's a little bright, but I think maybe you can see it. Okay, so this is going to be our guide or our pattern. I took this and laid it down and traced the design on a piece of plain white cotton fabric. I think you can see that. And I did use my light box if you want to help with this. You could also tape it on a window on a sunny or bright day and use that as well. One other thing that I did is I traced the design on both sides of the fabric. I don't think this is absolutely necessary, but I chose to do it just so that I would have the markings on both sides. And that also makes them a little bit darker and they're easier to see. Then I'm going to take small pieces of the colored fabric that correspond to our color map and sew them on. And as I told you in the first video, I've never tried this before. So instead of coming on here and trying 3 or 4 things that didn't work, I decided to give it a go last night. So I took a couple of pieces of fabric and started sewing them on. And just as a little appetizer, here's what it's looking like. It's very easy. It is not a fast process because you want to make sure that you cut very close to your seams, and you want to make sure that you put those seams on that line that you've drawn onto the background fabric. I wanted you to see what it's going to look like, because most of what happens here as far as these colored points, you're going to be doing on your own. I am going to show you here how I'm doing it, and we will pop back in to show the progress of this. But a lot of it is self-work. And I started here on the outside row because it was a very simple arc design, and I found that I was able to cut a strip of the purple fabric, there it is right there, at 1 3/4 inch, and I could position this so that I got 2 of the sections at a time. I could stretch it off, and that's perfectly okay to do. You're not going to find yourself in that situation much with this because of the way it's designed, but there are a few places that you could use that technique. So I placed it on top of this here, and then I added a little bit of the applique glue, and when I say a little bit, I really mean a little bit, just in the corners and along the edge, just some little dots here and there, so that when I place this, it would stay where I put it without having to use any clips or any pins. And then I sewed it on the machine. And I'd like to show you how that goes if I could. And we're going to position this. Let's see, let's go on this side. We want to be economical with our fabric. So we want to place it so we can get the best use. Now for this, I'm going to use my really good cutting scissors, and I'm going to cut it just a little bit longer than I need. So we're going to do this section of 2 right here, and I can see that this piece will fit over it, and it's just a small little piece. And then I'm going to put some dots of glue. I was hoping it hadn't dried up overnight and needed to be cleaned. And I'm going to show you, when I say a little bit of glue, what I mean. I'll hold this up in just a second. These little dots of glue are like little pin heads. Okay. There you go. Can you see that? Little tiny dots of glue right on the edge. And then I'm going to take that piece we cut, lay this down flat, nothing underneath it, and we're going to make sure that we cover up all of the area that needs to be covered. And then we're going to press it down. And the pressing it down is what makes the glue go into the purple fabric in this instance. Now you could set this with an iron, but when I tried it, I didn't need to. I just gave it a couple of minutes, maybe a minute, to hook those fibers together. And then I started sewing. Let me turn my machine on. Now I'm using, right now I have some gray thread in the top and I've got some white in the bottom. I don't think it really matters what color you use because we're going to be putting black bias tape on top of all of these seam lines. I put these 2 little pieces on temporarily just so you could see it. But we'll probably hold off on sewing any of the binding down until we've got all of the colored fabric. Now, here's the little trick to this. We've got this on. We're going to flip it upside down and we're going to sew it on the back. Now that's why we traced the design on the top so we could place the fabric, and on the back so we could sew it. And if you notice, the colored side is out. This is going to be the front of our design. This is going to be the back of the design. So we're putting this front side down. I think that's the hardest concept, because it kind of goes against everything that we usually think of when we're sewing, right? And then we're going to sew really close or on that line. And I found that going around these curves or these arcs, that we need to stop occasionally and reposition our fabric slightly, just so that we get a really smooth line. And we want to make sure that when we come to a section where you've got two lines joining and you're going to pivot the fabric to go in another direction, to stop right at the corner. And I'll show you why in just a minute. Even if that means you need to lift your presser foot up and slide it just back just a hair so that it will do that. And then remember, we're sewing this one piece down, so we're going to come back the other way. And see, that went just a little bit too far, so we're going to pull it back up, slide it back up, and come down in that hole from the previous stitch. And then we're back into the inside arc. And I think you're going to have some ability to adjust what that arc looks like when you put on that bias tape. But you still want it to be as exact as possible. And then in the middle there was one seam. We're going to go back and capture that, or one line. I didn't do a whole lot of back and forth to lock in the stitches, and you'll see why when I go to trim this. Okay, so here we go. Here's what we have. We've sewn that piece on right there. And if you'll notice, in the areas where we started and stopped it, you've got a little bit of a bird's nest there. But we're going to pull out what we can and trim really close so that that bias tape will cover it. Now this is where I really liked my little small lightweight scissors with the point, because it will allow me to get right up to that seam line. I think maybe if I had a pair of applique scissors, it would probably do the same thing. But for right now, this is working, and I don't really feel like making a 20-minute trip to go see if the store actually even has any. We just want to make sure we don't cut that backing fabric when we're trimming the colored pieces. Just about there. Be patient just a second. The inside's a little more difficult than the outside, because you want to make sure that you're cutting close, but you're not cutting into the backing or anything else. And see, we've got that trim now. Now we need to go back to where the purple joined the purple, and you know what? I didn't make that stitch. So let me stick that on the machine. See if I can figure out where that is. That is right there. And you will find that you will be going over these seams several times, because every time you add another piece of fabric, you want to make sure that you sew down that edge. And oops, I caught a fold in there. And I've got lots, oops, I got lots of strings. But I think we're good. I'm going to hold this up really close, and you can see that there's a small area where the fabric that I just sewed on folded over. So if you're familiar with what a rag quilt looks like, oh look, I got it. Okay, what I did was it folded over, so you had the wrong side of the fabric on top instead of the right side for about ½ inch. So I cut it super, super close, and then I was able to just use the fraying action of the fabric to fray it enough so that that piece that folded over just completely disappeared. I'm trimming up some extra strings here. This requires a little bit of a steady hand, but trust me, if I can do it, you can do it. We got a lot of strings. But if you'll see, that wasn't too hard, was it? And we've added this arc here. So now we're ready to go in with the next blue piece and red piece. And that's basically the way we're going to do this. I'm going to do all of the purples, blues, and reds. And then I will move on to the orange and the yellows, which would be the next like little section going around, next circle inward. And keep going circle by circle all the way to the middle. And then at that point, we'll probably have to logically think about how we're going to put the bias strip on and how it looks the best. But that's it. Gosh, listen, I was thinking this was going to be tremendously difficult to do. How on earth would I ever do it? Did I need to get the double-sided bonding interfacing so that we could stick it there? Did it need to be glued? Did I have to baste it? How was I going to deal with all the pins? All these thoughts were coming in my mind about how difficult this is going to be. And so far, it is not difficult. I think as we get further in and we get more layers, it will be a little more tedious because you'll have one layer of fabric on top of another, and you could have 3 at any given intersection, maybe even 4. But that's going to be just a matter of going slow and getting it done the way it should be done. And the good thing about this is if you mess it up, let's say for example that this blue piece that I put in here just didn't work. There was something wrong with it, didn't work. You just clip those stitches here on the outside, and you could cut it away really close like I just did, and then fray the remaining on that top line of stitches, probably without disturbing the bottom line. But hopefully we won't have that. Now, I do have some footage that I'm going to include in this that shows how I was tracing this pattern. It was just a regular school pencil. I prefer not to use a mechanical pencil because I want a little bit bolder, darker line. You're not going to see any of these lines on this, so that is not going to be an issue. And the softer pencil with a not with a sharp point, but with kind of a soft rounded point allows me to do it on my light box without damaging my light box. The other thing that I did was I took all of the individual shapes, and there were 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I think there's 15 shapes because I have 2 that I've cut out. And I traced the general shape of these shapes on a piece of paper. So when I get ready to cut, let's say for this is the blue. When I get ready to cut this blue fabric for the next piece, I can lay this down and know about how much I need to cut. It doesn't need to be exact, but you can see there I cut it. Instead of cutting a big old hunk of fabric out, I can cut something that's more in line with the actual shape and size that I need. Not absolutely necessary. You could just lay it down on a big piece of paper, a big piece of fabric and go for it. But I find that if I'm using a shape that's a little more in line with what I need in the end, it helps me a little bit. What else to share? Ironing is not going to be a big concern with this project once you get your background fabric ironed. I did press it after I put the markings on it because I wanted it to be flat and without wrinkles before I sewed on the first pieces, but I don't think even that's a big concern. And if you choose not to use the applique glue, you certainly could do it either by holding it in place or pinning it, your choice. I don't think that's absolutely necessary, but it did help me to move through it pretty quickly. So you may want to consider that. And you probably could use any variety of glues for this particular project because I don't anticipate this is something we're going to wash. While I won't say that I don't ever plan to wash it, I don't anticipate washing it as a general rule because it's going to be a wall hanging and it may get washed. It may hang for a year and then run through the dryer to fluff it up, or if it actually gets dirty, then we might hand wash it in some cold water so that we don't run the risk of any of the fabrics running. And for this particular project, I did not hand wash these or machine wash these fabrics ahead of time for bleeding, to keep it from bleeding, because like I said, I don't plan to wash it, and so I just didn't feel like that was necessary. So there we go, we're started, and so far so good. No big issues. It's relatively simple. I think I am going to swap out and change to a gray thread in the bobbin as well as up top, so it's not quite as bright and catching when you look at it, but we're on the way. So next time we visit, we'll have the outside rings done and we'll be working towards the middle. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave me a comment below and I'll keep an eye on those while we're working this project. And if I can help in any way, I'll be glad to do that. If you've enjoyed this video, please be sure to give us a like and subscribe to our channel. It's an exciting time here at the Shamrock Quilt Studio, and we're glad to have you here. We would welcome you to be a member. We are making plans for 2024 and hope that it will be a great year for everybody. We'll see you next time at the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Bye. Okay, we're going to do some close-ups here of the sewing, and we're just going to do one small section. We're going to do this right here, and we're going to start with just a little bit of glue. Just a little bit, as you can see. And then we're going to place this down right on top of our area. We're going to press it down. And I do like to use something just to put it in place. And you said that's the right side up. And it's just laying right on top of that. Now it's in place, it should not move for us, and we're going to take this to the machine. And we're going to line up that next section right on those pencil marks. And let's get this over here a little bit. See if we can get a better view. There we go. Okay. And line that needle up right on that intersection of the line, and we're using just a regular stitch. And we're going to just carefully sew right along that line. Right, we're going to stop it right at the intersection. And even though there's a stitch line here, we're going to stitch over it because that line of stitching held the previous piece in place. I went just a little far. Back it up just a fraction of an inch. There we go. I'm going to stitch this way. We want to keep our lines very smooth. And we're going to stitch just until the intersection. And if a full stitch is too much, we're going to manually adjust that. Pivot our fabric. And we're right at the intersection, so we're going to push the return, the reverse button. Then we're going to stitch once and stop. That's it. You don't want to overstitch. So now this is what you have. Okay, let's readjust our camera and I'll show you trimming. Okay, so we've got the stitch line here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to see where these extra threads are going. Okay, they don't seem to want to come out really easy, so we're going to trim them really super close. Whoops, if I can grab a hold of it. Okay. And now we're going to trim the fabric, and we want to grab just the purple fabric and we're going to trim super close. Can you see how close that is? And I'm going to tilt my scissors just a little bit so that they get even closer. Very, very close. And then we're going to do the same thing here. Let's trim that off. Just this purple fabric. It actually does help if there's a little bit of light behind it, because you can see that your fabric is folded down and out the way. If you do clip that background fabric, don't fret too much. We'll figure out a way to fix it. Okay, we're going to clip off that. That one's a little bit long. We're going to go back, trim it. And there you go. It's trimmed very, very close to the edge, as you can see. And we've just put that one in. That's not too bad. You can see here, this is an example of what that black bias tape is going to look like when we add it. But right now, it's just stuck there. And if we need to, we could just take it off. So you can see the stitch line underneath that. That's how it's going to look. So I encourage you to stitch along, see how far you get, and we'll be back next time with more.